I'm curious, are you all in? Do you know what being all in actually means? Poker. You're right. I'm a pastor. I should know what all in means with regard to poker. I have played some poker over the years. Never made a lot of money. I think the most I ever made was $2 maybe, and the most I ever lost was probably about the same amount. We're talking penny poker. Penny poker at Luther Rock with the confirmation cluster after hours. A lot about poker, but one of my colleagues helped me to learn what being all in means. And we'll get to that a little bit later. It all has to do with the gospel this morning from the 25th chapter of Matthew. It's a parable about the talents. It's the last parable that Jesus tells in Matthew's gospel. Jesus' disciples are beginning to understand and see that things are not going well. Things are headed downhill, particularly with the religious authorities and now increasingly the Roman authorities who've now come into Jerusalem during the time of the Passover. They're worried a little bit about their own security. They're worried about what's going to happen as they are noticing that things are not going well with Jesus and that things may not end well. The same is true for the Christian community that existed toward the end of the first century AD. Things were not going well 50, 60, 70 years after our Lord's resurrection. You know, he had promised that he would return. So far, he hasn't returned. Meanwhile, the temple in Jerusalem has been destroyed, and the Roman government is increasingly persecuting believers of all faiths. In other words, anyone who will not put the emperor first as God faces the potential of losing their life. The response that Jesus makes to his disciples just before his passion begins, they've been asking him questions about the end times and how they'll know when that's going to take place. Well, certainly the end times are just before them, not the end of the world, but the end of their leader's life. So Jesus shares this parable of the talents as a way of helping them to understand not just what they're to do, but even more important about who they are to be. To begin with, this parable is about talents. We're not talking about your ability to do something or your talent as a musician or an artist. No, in this case, a talent was an amount of money. In fact, it was not just a year's wages, but it was a career worth of year's wages. In other words, as much as you would make in your whole lifetime. Today's equivalent would probably be in the millions of dollars. Second, this parable is not an allegory that helps us to see ourselves in relationship with God, because when you look at the parable itself, the master is a crook. The text says that this master reaps where he has not sown, gathers where he has not scattered seed. So why does Jesus tell us this parable? That takes us back to all in. Now, let me tell you what all in means in poker. It can mean either that you've got an incredible hand, let's say a full house or four of a kind, or a straight flush or a royal flush, which would be the best hand of cards that you could ever have, especially if it was the right suit. So all in can mean that you're betting based on the fact that you're having a good hand, or conversely, it can be used as a bluff to make other people think that you have a good hand. Or occasionally it can be used by someone who goes all in so that if you're going to stay in the game, the opponents will have to go all in as well. But all in means you are putting all your chips on the table. You are completely invested in this particular game, win or lose. I think that's what Jesus is asking his disciples by sharing this parable. Are you all in? You know, there's one person in the parable who's given 5 talents. He invests the 5 talents, even though his master is a crook, and he doesn't have a clue what the master may do if he would lose all of his money. But he knows that the master will be upset if he doesn't earn something in return. So he's given 5 talents. He not only keeps those 5 talents, but he uses them to make 5 more talents. The same with the second individual who's given 2 talents. He takes those 2 talents, invests them, and is able to earn 2 more talents. And each of these is based in part on the ability that the master sees in his servants. Finally, the third is given 1 talent. He's afraid of the master. He's afraid that finally, the individual who's given 1 talent, who is obviously afraid. So instead of investing that talent as the others did, he digs a hole and buries it in the ground. He is trying to ensure that at least he will have something to return to the master. But he's surprised to learn when the master demands an accounting that he didn't do anything with the money at all. In fact, by not doing anything with the money, he lost money. I think this parable speaks to us as it did to the disciples, as it did to the early church, particularly when times are rough, when things that are going on around us that we're worried and fearful of. For the disciples, it was obviously Jesus' life. In the early church, it was the persecution by the Roman authorities. And in our case, we don't have to look around. It can be this pandemic or our economy or all the controversy that's going on with the election. This parable confronts us by asking us a question about our allegiance, I believe. Are we all in? Are we invested fully, committed fully to what God has promised us through Jesus Christ? You can't have just a little faith. You're either all in or you're not in at all. So are we all in? Are you all in? I think that's the question this week we need to be asking. God bless you as you wrestle with this, and I hope you have a great day, and I hope to see you at church on Sunday. Bye-bye.